Welcome everyone. We'll give everyone just a couple minutes here to log in, and then we'll go ahead and get started. But thanks for everyone who's joined already. Awesome. Looks like most people are starting to join. We do have quite a bit to get through, so I'd like to get right into the content as well. So welcome to today's webinar, which is Planning for Growth. Today, we're co-hosted by both Practice Ignition and Clockwork. So on the webinar today, also joined by my colleague Lizzie. She'll be helping out with the Q&A and poll questions. So if you ever have questions throughout, just put them into the Q&A or chat, and we'll try to get those answered. And then she'll relay back to us if needed. And then we're also joined by Fady of Clockwork, who will be co-presenting as well. Awesome. So just want to quickly run through the agenda for today's webinar. So the topic is planning for growth, but we want to kind of break that into a few different segments. So first, we want to look at what growth looks like in your firm and with your clients. We'll then be breaking down some of the systems for growth that might be necessary. And then looking at what you need to track in terms of growth and how you can set smart goals around growth. And then looking later on about some of the problems or opportunities that might come when you actually experience that growth in your firm. And today we are co-hosted by two software providers, both Practice Ignition and Clockwork. So ultimately we think that these software can help either you or your clients in terms of growth. So we'll give you a quick background and demo on those applications so you can see what those look like, and we'll do that towards the end. So today it is co-presented. My name is Ryan. I'm from Practice Ignition. I'm the general manager of our North America business. Really happy to be joined today by Fady of Clockwork. So we always like to bring people on that are way smarter than ourselves. So I've gotten to know Fady over the last few months, and he's got a really interesting background working as a CFO, both in a private company, as well as advising to small businesses as a CFO. And then ultimately he saw a gap in the market in terms of applications around forecasting and planning. So he decided to create a software company, Clockwork. So I'm gonna hand it over to Fady now, who will give a bit more background on himself and then get into the content for today.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ryan. So welcome everyone. Happy to have you here and happy to share everything with you as well. So a little bit more about myself. I started out in the private wealth management arena with Merrill Lynch and Edward Jones. And then I spent the majority of my career with Boeing. So I was between St. Louis and Seattle, working on the commercial and defense side, working in business operations and strategy there. And then I went into the oil and gas consulting world and developed a lot more practical knowledge that I could bring to the small business world. And I grew up in a small business family. My father owned restaurants in the St. Louis area. So he literally bought them when I was 2 years old. So I literally grew up in the restaurants and grew up in the small business. And so carrying that passion, carrying that forward, I decided to incorporate my own outsourced CFO, COO consulting firm, where I consulted for over 50 companies over about 2.5, 3 years. And that's where I found, as Ryan alluded to, the real market gap on the solutions and the resources for these small businesses and for financial transparency, financial visibility, the ability to really see exactly what the financial health of their company looks like. And so that's why I invented and founded Clockwork. So we'll just jump in there and start sharing some nuggets of knowledge to hopefully help you guys literally starting today. So let's talk about the growth in your firm. One of the most frustrating things I know when I was running my firm was, hiring anyone and how it affected the bottom line. And so, when you're trying to grow your firm and you're trying to grow your practice, and this belongs to same concerns from across the board of our own firms, bookkeeping, accounting firms, consulting agencies, to anywhere else, any technology companies, operations companies, whatever it may be. And so the question always is when do you want to hire? When can you hire? I know, I was working with tons of CPAs with my firm. And one of the most frustrating things was, how many clients can someone actually take on? How many clients do I need to have before I bring someone else on? How big of an impact is it going to take on my margins, on my cash, on that person becomes completely, fully utilized into the firm? And so those are some of the aspects that everyone needs to work through and talk through and actually figure out from an exact perspective. And so when you look at your firm as a whole, some firms have several hundred clients. Some firms are, one or two staff accountants. They have, several 50, 60, 70 clients. And so when you look at the split of the mix of the work that you're doing for your clients, so if it's month-end work, if it's year-end work, if it's only tax work, if you're doing, weekly cash updates and forecasting for the company, if you're helping them do a fundraise, if you're helping them, work any investor relations, any of that kind of stuff, those are all key factors that you have to consider when you can ask yourself, how many clients can you take on? And when you grow your firm, figuring out who you need to grow with and who you need to bring on to your firm that can complement the existing skill set and the existing client base that you have, with potential to go and offer additional services, additional tools, additional anything to the market. And so when you're looking at, your busy season, everyone knows, from the end of the fiscal year, end of the calendar year, all the way through, tax day, April, middle of April is always the busy season. And so one of the most common things that I've heard from every single CPA, my personal CPA, Clockwork CPA as well, and all the CPAs that I work with, is this year's tax season was especially brutal with all the new laws that were brought on from this last year. And so when you look at the planning for that, a lot of firms and a lot of agencies were taken surprised by that. So they were working ridiculous amount of hours, much more than they did the year before, a couple years prior, because the understanding of the entire strategies to actually execute the work was a little lackluster. And so being able to look at the actual plan to plan, week to week, month to month strategy on how many clients you're going to have, how much work is actually there, and then how you're going to affect that, quote unquote, slow season after the tax season is up. Because it's kind of funny, because when I was talking to the CPAs, I'm like, hey, tax season is over. Are you relieved? And they're like, well, not really, because I had all of this work that I had to put off because of all the extra work that I didn't see coming during tax season. And so, everyone took about a couple week breather, 3-week breather, and then they were jumping back into it, making up for all the work that they missed with all the overtime that they were doing to plan for this crazy busy season. And so it's always important to actually track exactly how much do you think it's going to do, how much work is going to be necessary to accomplish all your client work and your existing monthly tasks, week-ending tasks, whatever it may be, quarterly tasks. And so understanding what that slow season is going to actually look for you, and is it actually going to be a slow season? The summer is always kind of a lull in business just in general from a services perspective, but is it actually going to be a lull for your firm? And so having that complete understanding of, when you're trying to grow your firm and your hiring needs, do you only need to hire people for your busy season? Is it something that you're only looking to bring on outsourcing for a few months, hiring freelancers? What exactly is going to be your capacity, your overflow planning for your firm? Is it something that you want to bring on and carry that burden throughout and really grow your firm from a headcount perspective, and then have that grow from a client perspective? Those are all decisions that you need to plan out and have completely built out scenarios of what that's going to look for your firm. And so one of the most important things with growing your firm is having that technology differentiator for your firm to really set yourself apart. So, when I was going and gathering my clients for my outsourced CFO firm, one of the most beneficial things, I had some partnerships with payroll companies, some partnerships with AHR companies, and a lot of cloud-based technologies to help aid the companies that I was consulting for. So that for me was a very easy, sticky way to get in with the company, because everyone trusts their CPA. Having a CPA, that's your person. If everyone trusts their book, having your bookkeeper is your person. And so if you can take that one level deeper and provide a technology differentiator where you say, hey, working with me gets you 10% off this software. Working with me gets you 20% off this software. And actually having something more ingrained with your firm, with your practice, with all of your clients that makes their life easier and your life a lot easier. For me, when I was outsourced CFO, payroll would always naturally land in my lap because a lot of companies, they don't want to deal with it. And so when I'm running payroll or managing payroll or, setting up new employees or setting up or terminating employees, whatever it may be, the easier those systems were to deal with, the less headache it caused me. And so my time was a lot more easily utilized and easily handled when I'm looking at the entire be all end all of actually producing and providing those services for that client. So when you look at your client, obviously it's awesome to have your firm grow. But if your clients aren't growing with your firm, then you're always on the hunt for new companies, new clients, new people, new whatever it is. So it always kind of goes hand in hand. Your firm should grow as much as your clients should grow. Because as they grow, as you grow with your clients, you're setting up that infrastructure. I can't tell you how many times when I first started my firm, I'm like, okay, I'll just do kind of transactional level things. I'm a finance guy, finance and accounting background. So I was like, I'll just build your model. I'll build your financial model. I'll build your projections and I'll hand it off to you. 9 times out of 10, the client's like, wait, I want you to help me grow it because you're coming up with the foundation of it. You're asking all these difficult questions of me. So can you own this? And for me, it was a mindset shift where I'm like, well, I can own it. Then it goes from a transactional based relationship to something more stable and something more structured where it's like, okay, we'll start at, $2,500 a month and I'll manage your model. I'll project your predictions, your cash flow forecast, your pitch deck, whatever it may be. And then 9 times out of 10, those clients were coming back and asking for more services. Can you do this? And is this something you're involved in? Is this something you learn? And then that grows and grows and grows. So my firm, although we had over 50 clients, the initial clients that I was signing up, every single one of those, literally 100% of those engagements increased in value every single quarter, every single 6 months, whenever we actually did a reevaluation of what that looks like. So, serving as that advisor for your clients. And so they don't look at you as more as just a transactional piece. They don't look at you as transactional service advisors, getting out of that little box of I'll call you at the end of the year or I'll call you during tax season. I'll give you literally a pile of junk that you have to sift through and work through. And, then you have to clean up the headache of the client being kind of, I'll deal with it then. I'll deal with it later. I'll kick the can down the road and keep doing it and doing it and doing it. And that drove me nuts when I was running my firm. It's like, listen, I'd rather have you pay me a little bit every month than pay me a whole lot and I have to clean up all of your mess. And so adding that level of advisory services to your offering makes you even more indispensable as having, those technology differentiators, anything else like that. And so when you're providing that growth for your clients, allow them to have the financial visibility for them to focus on their business. Because one thing, my clients literally they were always calling me and saying, hey, how are we looking at this? And how are we looking at that? And I'm like, okay, well, let me, stop everything I'm doing, log into QuickBooks Online or log into Xero and, filter on and pull a report. And, I'm walking them through the report and they're asking these very, very basic questions that they should know, quite frankly. And so allowing them to have the financial visibility that they need to really focus on their business and not focus on trying to figure out what they don't know, because they obviously know what they don't know. In terms of their finances, in terms of the financial health, in terms of their margins, in terms of their top line, bottom line, their COGS, their OPEX, everything, they're trying to figure it out as they go. And so if you can provide them the tools that they need to really have that financial visibility, that clarity into what their financial health looks like, that will allow them to focus on their business and actually grow their company. And so then, you're cementing yourself as that advisor, as that, CFO, as that COO, that next level service provider. And so when you're looking at, it's one thing to set them on QuickBooks Online, because I've had so many calls, and literally every single one of my clients that I had, I switched them from, if they came from, whatever it may be, kind of antique, old school accounting systems. If I was lucky, they had an accounting system. I would switch them all to QuickBooks Online or Xero, whatever suited them, whatever they preferred. I was switching them to cloud-based tools, because that really is the future. I mean, Intuit is having a massive push to push everyone onto QBO. And I know everyone likes to say QBO is not as robust, and I 100% agree. QBO is kind of a, it is pretty rudimentary when it comes to the robustness of QuickBooks Desktop, but it's allowing those tools to educating your clients on those tools, and let them focus on their business, provide them with what they need to succeed, and then allow them to focus on what they need to focus on. And then one of the most frustrating things with my firm was I would get all these what if calls. What if we sold this product? What if we went into this market? What if we hired this person? What if we blah, 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 blah. I'll go and spend a few hours and I'll build out a model and I'll send it back to them. And then they'll say, okay, this looks great, but what if we did this, this, and this, and this? And I'm like, well, why didn't you ask me that when you first called me and said, hey, what if we did this? And so we spend that time going back and forth on an Excel sheet. And instead of actually having a conversation of this is what it's doing to your bottom line, this is what your variance is. And so provide your clients with that tools to let them do it themselves. One of the most dangerous things is letting someone who's not very familiar with their accounting system or with Excel or Google Sheets or anything to fumble through all that. You'll end up with 10 times more questions than answers for your clients. And so allow them to have those tools that they can be in control of those scenarios. And so like I said, like I mentioned, be that next level service provider. A CPA is something that every single person needs. Sure, there are certain people that file their own taxes and for their simple kind of services, simple kind of businesses, simple lives, they file their own taxes and that's great. But everyone needs a CPA in their life. You have questions, you have answers, and the CPAs are always, you're literally that person. That's your responsibility to provide those services and those questions. And so there, really isn't a shortage of CPAs out there. But there is a shortage of CPAs that are providing that next level service for growing their firm, for growing their companies, growing their clients, educating their clients. So their clients are literally better operators, better business people, better entrepreneurs, better everything from an all-around perspective from doing business with you. And so that's what I mean by, serving as that next level service provider, where you become so ingrained in their business that they can't imagine doing anything without you. We've all had those calls when a client calls us and say, hey, things aren't working out. I'm going to move it to this person, or I'm going to move it internal, or I'm going to do, X, Y, or Z. Be so instrumental that I've had several calls with clients where, my ultimate goal for them is for them to hire a CFO and replace me, hire a full-time CFO and replace me. More times than not, when we do find that CFO and we do bring them on and we onboard them full-time, they still keep me on to help that CFO grow. And they still keep me on in some capacity. So it's not hey, you're done here, we brought someone else on. I was ingrained in their business. And so, with that next level service provider, you become so ingrained in that business, they literally can't see their business growing without you. And so, adding all those technology, the technological differentiators makes you that next level provider, because then they look at and say, okay, if we lose, Joe, what does that do to our business? Then we lose Clockwork, we lose Practice Ignition, we lose QuickBooks Online. We would have to go and set up our own accounts and set up our, all these different things. You become so ingrained in their business that they literally can't imagine not having you there. And so when you look at, professional services firms, the future of them are not just doing consulting. They're not just doing tax work. They're not just doing CPA work, month close, account reconciliation. KPMG, you look at all the big four firms, they started out as accounting firms. Now they're consulting agencies. They're building technology products for their very, very, very big ticket clients. And they're spending millions and millions of dollars with those firms because they're adding that technology layer on top of their services. And so when you look at professional services as an industry, the future of it is paired directly one-for-one with technology. How are you utilizing technology to make your professional services that much better? And so, like I said, be irreplaceable, be indispensable. Don't be a commodity. Have your firm be that differentiator. Have your firm set your services, set you up as a completely different kind of CPA or bookkeeper or advisor or whatever capacity you're offering this client or any client of yours. Be irreplaceable. There's no better feeling than having a client literally tell you, I never want you to do business without you, and I want to keep you on as an advisor even, or as a CPA full-time, or all the job offers that I've got from running my advisory or running my CFO consulting firm was mind-blowing to me, because I never once thought that it was that much of a differentiator, that much of kind of the next level service. And so it's super humbling, and it's an amazing experience to have. So really be irreplaceable by being the next level service provider.
Awesome. Thanks for all that. I think that's really interesting to look at. I think what we're going to get into now is kind of like the looking at growth in terms of the systems and goals associated with that. But I think before you even get into any of this, you really have to understand what Fady was just talking about of, what it actually looks like to provide those services, what you mean to your clients when you actually are providing those services. So then when we look to scale upwards, whether that's bring on 1 client, 5 clients, 10 clients in a month, how can we actually make sure we are providing that service? And in that case too, Fady was providing a lot of very high value services. So you might not have the capacity to provide those very high level services. So I think that's really good to kind of segment out what your services are before you look at what you're selling to them. So here, when we look at systems for growth, again, what I said is how can we make this scalable? What Fady did touch on briefly is a technology stack. I think it's really important to think of this in 2 different ways. So your practice apps. So what are you using internally to run your business? So you might use something for practice management. You might have something for email marketing. You might have a CRM to manage your sales pipeline. And then you might have something to onboard and collect payments from your clients, and perhaps a general ledger as well. So when we think about that within your practice, I think the big thing to consider is how are those all connected? So if they're not connected, that means that's going to be a different process for each one of these. And likely, if you are to bring on another staff member, that means training them on all these different apps. But if we can make sure those are connected workflows, it's going to be much easier. And then training your staff on using those practice apps will be much helpful. And I think the also way too is if you can kind of optimize these practice applications, this might save you some time from hiring on an assistant or a virtual assistant to actually do that as full-time work. So how can you kind of leverage these applications as if they were almost full-time employees? The next one is client apps. So if Fady was mentioning, he would take all of his clients off those historic accounting systems, put them on QuickBooks Online or Xeros. And I think the thing to think about there is the data flows. So first, how is the data getting into the accounting system? So maybe you're using something like a hub doc for your invoices or bills or receipts. So that's automatically pushing the data in. And then once the data is in the accounting system and it's reconciled, how are we getting it out of there? And how are we actually explaining the data to the clients? So that's where something like Clockwork comes in to give those clients that financial visibility so they don't have to come back to you all those times with those what if questions. And we think about managing these apps. Say if we've got 50 clients, we've got 100, then 200. If we narrow down the applications that we use, it's going to be way easier when we bring on a new staff member to educate them in a few apps instead of 100 different apps. And if one app breaks, then that means it breaks for all your clients. So being sure you can really define that and segment that out into what's the apps we use to manage our practice versus what's the apps we support for our clients to use. Another thing to consider is looking at that flow of connected workflow. So I think you need to be able to segment out your sales team versus your service team. So if you are small, if it's just yourself, like Fady was saying, when it was just himself, he was doing all the sales, but he was also providing the service. So if you're working on all these projects for your clients, you're doing their month-end close, but then also you're trying to bring on new clients, you really have to segment out those two things. And how can you look to bring in a more simplified process and perhaps some technology to make that easier? Fady, do you want to comment on that? What it was like to be a part of the sales team and the service team?
Yeah, absolutely. It was super frustrating, to be honest, when you're trying to grow your firm and you're trying to grow your agency, because that finding that balance of actually providing the service and doing the business development work was very difficult. There were weeks where, all of Monday and Tuesday, I was out there, meetings, coffees, webinars, every single thing you can think of, presentations, workshops, to get the business in. And then come Wednesday, I'm drowning with the work that I should have been doing on Monday and Tuesday. So now I have a complete day of Wednesday and Thursday that I got to catch up on everything. And I have all the follow-ups from the sales side. So it was super hard to balance. But then when I started using more, a lot more technology into how I was managing things, I would set things up in my CRM. I would set things up in the accounting system. I would set things up where, things would run on their own in their back end. So emails were going out, whatever things were happening. And I was still able to provide the BD, provide the service that I was hired for, as well as doing the work. And then when I brought on additional staff, they were just plug and play. They saw the systems that were existing. And they're like, okay, I can leverage this. And let me use this system. Let me use this system. And then they started using it. So it wasn't, a full download from my brain and how I was doing a bunch of stuff. It was really, full scale, it was a scalable solution and full rinse, repeat, and work.
Awesome. So yeah, just want to give a quick example before we move on, what that might actually look like in terms of that scalable onboarding process from, prospect to signed client, and some applications that we recommend or we see firms using. So a lot of firms will have some sort of website inquiry form that might link back to their CRM. So maybe you're using HubSpot or Pipedrive. So someone comes into your website, we're capturing information from them. So name, email address, phone number. From there, then, if that's going into your CRM, you could set up an automated email. So sending them an email then with a form. So something like a type form or a Google form, because there's so much information you need to gather before you can even know if they might be a qualified client for you. So they're then filling out a form where you're finding out, what type of businesses are they, who is their old accountant, why they want to come to you, what services they're looking for, what bank account do they use, all these different questions that you need to ask. But how can you have those automated, figured out before you even get into that initial sales call? And then at that point too, you might decide, hey, this client's not a good fit for me. Maybe refer them on to a friend or tell them to kind of move on elsewhere. Once you actually do meet with them, I think leveraging tools like Zoom or some sort of virtual meeting. So Fady mentioned he was going out for coffees every day and that was taking all his time. Maybe see if someone can just get on a phone call and Zoom call and you can do a screen share instead of, driving or commuting across the city to conduct one of these calls. Then having a process to actually close them to become a paying client. So that's where something like practice ignition would come in. So clearly laying out your terms of service, your pricing, getting an engagement letter signed, and then from there, setting up automatic payments moving forward. Just one little administrative thing that you're not going to have to worry about moving forward. And then figuring out, okay, we've got this client signed on. Who's doing the work now? So where does that hand off? So having some sort of internal practice management system like a Carbon or Zero Practice Manager. So once that client's signed, we can then divvy up the work to the team so they know what they're supposed to do. So yeah, that's just one example of some ways you could look to, plug and play some technology in those different stages that might help make that process easier. So if you are in that growth mode where you have a lot of clients coming in, you can look to kind of plug in those technologies there. Cool. The next thing I want to talk about is tracking what matters. So I think if you think about growth as a whole, and a lot of this comes from the bit of background, the founder of Practice Ignition, Guy Pearson, founded his own accounting firm, and he was able to grow that from 0 clients up to top 100 size in Australia. And I think one thing he credits to is the whole time, even when he had 0 clients, he was tracking KPIs and metrics the whole way and setting goals and holding himself and his team accountable. Because if you're not going to track anything, if you just say, I want to grow, you're never going to get anywhere. So I think when we look at this, knowing what a metric is versus a KPI, So a metric is just going to be a specific thing you can measure. So maybe it's your recurring revenue, the cost to acquire a customer. But what's that key metric that feeds your business? Perhaps that's the number of clients you bring on. So the more clients you bring on, that affects all those other metrics. So setting a KPI that you and everyone wants to track towards in your business. And then when we get into goal setting, so making a goal, this is just so you can look more into this, but like a SMART format. So specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and timely. So as I said before, we don't want to just say, oh, well, I want to grow. How do we specifically want to grow, and what things do we want to grow in our business? So just going to talk through a couple quick examples on what this might look like. So perhaps we want to raise our average revenue per year per client or client group by 10%. So maybe it's 2,000 currently, but we want to get that up to 2,200 within the next 12 months. So again, you can see that kind of fits all that criteria of a SMART goal. So there's a few ways we could get there. We could sell more services to our existing clients. So as Fady mentioned before, he said all of his clients that he brought on, over time, they were paying him more, which is great. That's what we would consider, expansion revenue. So your existing clients are paying you more money. You don't actually have to spend the time going to find new clients. So how could you do that? So let's say your average service that you offered your clients was $600 a month. So if 1 in 3 clients took up that additional service, that would boost our revenue up to $2,200 on average per client. Another way you could do that is look at higher value clients. So maybe we feel like we're underpricing our services. So we want to bring on more higher value clients at a higher price. So in that scenario, we would need to start bringing in clients around $3,000 per year. And then say we're starting at 100. If we brought on 25 more at 3,000, that would get us up to that 2,200. So just kind of thinking and breaking these goals down. So we know what it takes to get there and the different ways we can get there. And there's not one right way to get there. And if we don't get to our goal at the end of the year, why didn't we? And kind of readjust and set a goal for the new next year or period. The last example I want to look at is, actually increasing that number of clients or client groups. And I think the big thing that comes with that is making sure you do have the capacity. So if you do have that capacity to bring on 40% new clients, then how can you actually get there? So the one example I want to go through is, let's say we had 100 clients now. We want to grow that by 40%. So we need 40 new clients in the next 12 months. How are we going to get there? So I think the one thing to consider is acquisition cost. What guys always told me is that accountants that want to grow are afraid to spend money on marketing. And I think it's, you might have referrals as a good source, but you should also try to find some ways where you can invest some money in marketing, and that can actually lead to new customers. So I'll give one quick example of what he did. So he was the accountant for startups in Sydney, Australia. So he decided events would be a really good strategy for him to help get his brand known within Sydney. So he would set up an event called Startup Beers. He had some friends at Atlassian, which is a very large tech company now. And he would have them come in, he'd set up a panel, and then he had some friends at breweries, so he'd go get all the beers. And then he would host a topic once a month called Startup Beers and have different panelists. He would pay for the beers, and then he would just set up an event registration form. So, he was only spending about $500 per event, but he's getting about 100 people at each event. So if you think of all those people going to an event about startups was probably a good potential fit for him. So he only had to convert a few of those people into paying customers then in order to make sense in terms of payback. So, start thinking about those ways that if you are going to be spending outbound on marketing, what's that cost you're going to be incurring to acquire that customer? So what are all the sales and marketing costs involved? And then how long is it going to take you to pay back? So yeah, just wanted to give a couple of those examples so people can start to get their head around how you might want to set these goals and then the different ways you can try to get there. Cool. Next thing we want to talk about is, so let's say all that, that marketing is working, we're spending money, we're bringing out a bunch of new customers into the business, but this might also come with a lot of problems or potential opportunities. So we kind of crossed out the problems there. So I think the big thing we kind of want to reiterate is along this whole journey, people are going to be your greatest asset. You are a service, you are in the services industry, you are providing services. So you're always going to need to make sure you have the people to provide those services. So I wanted to give a quick shout out to a couple of companies that might help you hire. So Accounting Fly is a network that can help you hire accounting talent across the States. And that can be the remote talent or within your area. And they are really focused on making sure those accountants do know about cloud technology. So check that out. if you haven't heard of them. Another would be the outsourced accountant, or TOA. They help match you with staff in the Philippines that can help handle some of that work. So again, there's a bunch of different ways to hire. And I think that's often what we hear is that's the most difficult thing. So just wanted to provide a couple resources that might help with that. I think then when you are hiring, you have to think about culture. So, maybe it was just you and 3 people when you began, but now we're up to 20 staff. So making sure everyone, back to that point of retaining, making sure people like working at your company, making sure they see growth in their role. So obviously some ways you can kind of incentivize people to stick around would first be setting up some sort of performance comp within your firm. So really rewarding your staff for bringing on new clients or, achieving certain goals within the firm. And then looking at perhaps even an ESOP for some of those higher level managers. So letting them start to buy into the business at a younger age. So when comes time for you to sell the business, you actually have someone that's already has a vested interest in your business that might buy it off of you. Fady, do you have any kind of comments on that of growing up? And then as we get into this next one here of kind of what to do once you've hit that growth levels?
Yeah, absolutely. So, when you do hire, I know for me, when I first started, I'm like, my level of service is at this bar. And I can't bring anyone on that I don't trust is going to provide that level of service and that level of that performance level of service with those skills. And so, it's always super important to, when you do hire on people, actually have an onboarding process, actually have onboarding training material, actually walk through exactly what a day in the life is going to look like for your firm. Not every firm is the same, and not all clients are the same. So it's always important to really actually have a full onboarding process as well. And then, when it comes to, you're merging or you're selling or, you want to keep growing, when you have those technology differentiators in your firm, it's going to make you that much more attractive to either buy other companies out or be bought, or obviously, keep growing it yourself. If you want to bring on future partners, like Ryan was mentioning, having ESOPs, if you have people that started at the grassroots, started very, at the foundation of your firm and of your practice, and they want to grow and they want to eventually become a partner and you want to eventually become a pretty significant firm, those are always the key multipliers for you. Because if you're trying to sell a professional services firm, an accounting firm, and an outsourced CFO firm, there's a firm here in Chicago. They were an outsourced CFO firm, and they sold to a larger accounting firm that wanted to offer a outsourced CFO branch, an outsourced CFO arm. I knew the founder of the outsourced CFO firm, and he barely made any money on the sale, but it was a huge deal, all this kind of stuff. But the reason that was because they were strictly hiring, very low level talent right out of school or and that was it. There was no growth inside the company. There was no growth with the accountants. There was no continuing education. There was no paying for school. There was no, anything kind of really to grow the talent to be that next level. And so, they ended up taking kind of a little bit of a discount because of that firm. But I also know this other firm out on the West Coast that sold their agency for like a 4 times multiple, which is kind of unheard of for a professional services organization. But that's because they had these technology sources. They had this system, this ecosystem where they used all these tools like MailChimp and HubDoc or whatever it may be across the board. And that was so ingrained in their culture. That was ingrained in their service that they were offering, that it made them that much more attractive, that much more appealing, and that much more valuable.
Awesome. And I think just one last point to that is, if you do want to kind of keep the business, but I think try to make yourself obsolete. So hire in your replacements, as we said, kind of bring people up the organization. And it doesn't mean you can still be an ownership stake in your firm, but not work in the day-to-day. You could move on to another job or do something else, but still own a significant stake of your company, sit on the board and be involved in decisions. But it doesn't mean you have to do in the day-to-day. So I think that's often a consideration that people don't think is actually making themselves obsolete, but still maintaining themselves as an owner within the firm. So kind of all things to consider as you do kind of go down that growth trajectory. I know we kind of covered a whole lot of things there, but now we do want to kind of show you quickly in each application how this might help you, whether you're planning for your own growth or maybe planning for growth with the client. So Fady, I'm going to press it over to you,
Okay.
so you can share your screen.
Great. Okay. So when you're looking at our website, obviously clockwork.ai, we do have a product demo here, but I will tell you it's a little outdated. We're enhancing the product pretty much every few weeks. So just keep that in mind. So obviously when you log in, this is something you guys will all be very familiar with. We have single sign-on functionality. So with all of your accounts, doesn't matter if you have one or you have 100 accounts, if you have your one login, just like QuickBooks Online, just like Xero, just like Bench, just like Zendu, whatever it may be, single sign-on, you'll be able to select which account you want to go into. And when you're in when you're in Clockwork, you're automatically launched into the dashboard. And so keep in mind, when you sign up, there is no long belabored onboarding process. You're literally integrating. We integrate with QuickBooks Online and we integrate with Xero, and it automatically pulls your transactional level data. So it's pulling your chart of accounts. We're not pulling reports and trying to show them in a cool, pretty way. We're pulling your general ledger, your chart of accounts, every single little thing from your company and building your customized dashboard. So the sign-up process is literally 8 screens. It's your name and your password. We ask simple questions about, when you were incorporated, what industry are you in, and how many employees you have. It helps the back-end AI, the back-end algorithm, learn more about your business on top of all the data. And so again, this is the dashboard that you get launched into. So you have a completely interactive P&L, essentially right here with your financial model, where your actuals will be this shaded area in the back. And you're always going to have a rolling 12 months of actuals shown on the model. And then the dotted lines are your forecasted numbers. And up here, if you don't want to see certain things, you can deselect or select what you want to see and what you don't want to see. And so over here, you can filter on which months, let me minimize this, which months you want to see in terms of your 12 months all the way out to 60 months, because Clockwork will give you that 5-year projections based on your company's demographics, your industry, your trends, previous history, anything like that. And then on here is where your cash flow will look. So you'll have your 65-week cash flow forecast. So similar functionality as above. You're always going to have a rolling 13 weeks of actuals shown up here. You'll have your week ending balances, cash in, cash out. And then the solid line and the dotted line are your actual bank balance. And so again, you can filter all the way out 65 weeks, get a full view of what your cash is going to look like on a week ending basis. And then getting into the real meat of things, you look at the financial model. Like I said, this is your transactional level data. This is your chart of accounts when you're looking at the financial model. Once it loads, of course, whenever you do demo, it takes a little second. So, like I said, this is going to be your P&L the second that you get launched in and everything's imported. So you can collapse or expand all of these accounts so you can have a truncated view of your P&L from your gross revenue, COGS, OPEX, all the way down to your EBITDA and your net profit. And so you'll be able to see every single thing from an actuals and forecasted columns perspective. And from a visual perspective, if you just want to compare quarter over quarter, you can simply deselect months here and it'll show you quarter over quarter. You can do the same for annual, monthly, or quarterly solely. And so when you're looking at, what I mentioned with the what if questions and all the constant, phone calls I was getting and all the simple questions I was getting is, what if we added this, or what if we went into this market? Users can actually do that right here in Clockwork. So you'll simply hit new, it'll pop a new row in their gross revenue, and they'll say, new market. And so they'll type that in, hit enter, and then bam, you have a new line in your P&L. And none of this goes back into QuickBooks Online or Xero. So you're not messing up anything in your accounting system. And so here you can come out, you'll be able to scroll all the way to the right. You'll be able to come out here and say, okay, I think in November of 2019, it's going to be, $40,000. So you simply type in $40,000, hit enter. The table will automatically recalculate everything, like I said, down to the bottom line. So it'll go all the way down to your net profit, exactly what that's going to do to your business and how that's going to affect your actual cash flow as well. And so here you have that same functionality with your cost of goods sold. So that new market, what does that relate to in your COGS? Same with your OpEx. If you want to hire new people, move into a new office space, whatever it may be, add new, automatically recalculates and automatically sits in here. So when you're looking at your cash flow, like I said, the financial model will feed directly into your cash flow. And so you'll have your week ending balances, your actuals versus your forecast. And there's nothing you have to do at month end or weekend or anything. We are pulling your data every hour from QBO or Xero. So there's nothing you have to do on Clockwork's side to do month end reconciliations, to show week ending balances or anything like that. It's automatically shown in Clockwork. So you'll have your beginning balances. All your bank accounts will be listed here. Most companies have more than one, but this is our demo account, so we have one. It'll have your cash in, cash out. Cash in is your AR plus everything you have forecasted in your model. Cash out is your AP plus whatever you have forecasted in the model. Gives you your ending balances. Very simple, very easy to use. And one of our newest features that we're actually growing pretty regularly is our metrics dashboard. And so here on your metrics dashboard, you'll be able to see, kind of a waterfall chart of your income all the way down to your net profit, your margin per customer size. A lot of companies like to say we made $20 million. It's like, okay, well, 18 million of that came from one customer and it cost you 23 million to even get that 18 million from them. So, you're not as successful as you think you are. And so that's what this chart really brings to light for the customers and the clients. So here you have your operating margin over time. Again, I wish every company had 100% operating margin over time, but for the demo, down here we have some liquidity ratios, debt to equity ratio, current ratio, so on and so forth. And so when you look at the settings side, so here you can update your credit card, update all your information, your plan. We have an unlimited user policy with Clockwork. And so one subscription, unlimited users, you can have 100 users, doesn't matter. We have 3 different tiers. And so to add users, you'll literally hit here, you'll type in their email. Admin obviously does everything they can. Employee only does the forecasted numbers. So that's for your salespeople, business development, marketing, anything like that. And then view only is obviously view only. So a lot of companies give that to their banks, give that to their insurance companies, anyone that wants to see that. Some companies even give it to their board of directors, to their investors, have a real time view into the financial health of the company. And that is Clockwork.
Awesome. So yeah, if people have questions, feel free to pop them in. I'm just going to give a quick demo here on Practice Ignition and how it kind of relates to some of those things that we were talking about as well. So for those of you who are new to Practice Ignition, within your account, you have all that visibility around your revenue in your dashboard. So when we talked about those things earlier of looking at recurring revenue or changing that average revenue per client, we're actually pulling that all up into your dashboard. So this is pulling from your accepted contracts or engagements within the system, so you always know how you're going. And again, to that point of setting your goals, within the dashboard here, you can kind of set those each month. So let's say, and back to that example of, we wanted to grow top line revenue, say 30%, kind of going in and setting our budgets each month accordingly. We could adjust this for seasonality too. So, as Fady was mentioning earlier, a lot of you might do tax work. So maybe we'll see a big spike up in these earlier months of the year and then make up for that seasonally. So the whole idea is, how can we surface this information up so you have a better idea on how you're performing as a firm? I mean, back to that point of onboarding a new client or getting a proposal out, I just want to show you first what that looks like to your client. So the whole idea is if we've got a client and we're going through that sales process, we can quickly send them off a proposal here, professionally branded towards your firm, clearly lays out the services you're doing to them. The payment schedule, so how are you billing for those services so there's no more awkward conversations about money. Capturing their payment details, bank or card details here, and then setting up automatic processing moving forward. So we've got that automatically, and you never have to chase a payment again. And then getting an engagement letter signed, so making sure that client clearly understands the terms that they're liable for, and getting digital signature within. So that's what that looks like. I did mention website integration earlier. So this is one feature we have in Practice Ignition that actually embeds directly into your website. So this allows you to, if you do have some of your services or packages, kind of offering them directly on your website. So this is actually Guy's accounting firm. So they offer some basic levels of bookkeeping. Those have different tiers. And then if someone comes in, they could actually automatically inquire for those services. So we're capturing that information up front to kind of speed up that sales and onboarding process. So if we're confident with our website, we can just push people to this website to automatically kind of set up and go through the next steps. They then select additional services and then submit. This will then basically allow you to have that proposal created in draft in your account. You can review that. You can go in and have that sales conversation. So if we talk about automating that process from inquiry to signed customer, we've also done a huge part of that by just linking one thing into the website. So I know those are very brief demos, but while everyone was on and we were talking about the different applications, we did want you to be able to see that visibility on how it might be able to help either you or your clients. Fady, do you have anything else on that?
No, that was great. I saw someone asked a question in the chat.
Cool.
So I'll go ahead and answer that. So the question was, how much of the Clockwork data is dependent on having super clean books with tracking categories or classes versus creating these in the app? So Clockwork is very much garbage in, garbage out. So if your books are absolute, a mess, then Clockwork will show how much of a mess they are. And one of the kind of a tertiary benefit that has kind of grown out of using Clockwork is having your clients understand what having your books as a mess looks like and what that does for their business. I had someone sign up for Clockwork, and she kind of reached out to me and she's like, hey, my gross margin is 97%. That's not right. Whatever it may be. I had my full dev team on it. We were looking through everything. We're like, hey, this is literally 1-for-1 of what you have in your accounting system. And she was like, oh, well, this is what my accountant said to me. And I'm like, well, your accountant is not sending you what's in your actual books. He's reclassifying everything after the fact, but in your actual QuickBooks Online, this is how it looks. And so for her, it was like, holy cow. And I actually got on a call with that accountant. And he was like, well, I was done fighting that fight with them. And so I just kind of set it up this way just so, I knew that I was going to change everything at the month end. So it not only did it help the client with actually understanding how their accounting or how their finances are actually set up, it helped the accountant educate the client, because I know we've all gone through battles of, with the client of saying, we have to set it up this way. And they're adamant on setting it up this way and only this way, so far and so forth. So, with Clockwork, it's 1-for-1 of what's in your accounting system.
Cool. There's another question that came in. Our firm has a batch of transactions for our services which were offered in that month. So is it possible for each account executives to debit only for their accounts assigned and that being integrated to QuickBooks Online or Xero? I think I understand that question. Lizzie, do you understand it? So as far as setting that up in Practice Ignition, I'll explain this to my best of my ability. When you'll take a step back, you have services within Practice Ignition. Those link to QuickBooks Online or Xero, so they map to your chart of accounts in Xero. So that's where we create the invoice or the service item in QBO. And then our payment schedule just collects off those schedules as well. But when you're sending out a proposal to the client, you add your client in. So this pulls across your client list from QuickBooks Online or Xero. If it's new, you can start them here and then we'll create them there for the invoicing. You select your service. So what is the service you're doing? You give that bill type and price of the service, whether that's recurring upfront. So in that case, for recurring service, say we wanted that to be $550 every month. Every first of the month, we'll create that invoice and then we'll collect that payment. So that's how that gets created, and then that's how that pulls back across to QuickBooks Online or Xero. There was something about account executives to only debit their accounts. So we don't have any user level permissions. So I guess if you have different sales team, everyone would be in one Practice Ignition account. We can only link one QBO file to one QBO account. So if you did kind of run those separate, you could have multiple accounts. But you can also tag these by the, you could set up a tag for each executive, and you'd also see who from your firm is creating these proposals. So I hope that answers the question. Happy to get on a call if you want further clarification on that. Awesome, thanks. We did have a couple poll questions too. Before I forget, so we do want to kind of know a bit more about who's on today. So just going to go ahead and launch these few questions. If you could kind of explain, what you do in your firm, so what kind of business you're in, and then we'll have a couple more. Just want to make sure we can follow this up correctly and we kind of have a better understanding on who's joining us today. While those polls are going, Fady, do you have any we've got 5 minutes left here. Anything else you wanted to cover off from your end?
Yeah, if you guys would like to learn anything more or have any additional questions with Clockwork, please feel free to reach out. My personal email is just my first name, Fady, at clockwork.ai. So feel free to reach out. Just say that you were a part of the webinar. I'd love to have a conversation with you, walk through, even more of a demo. But I appreciate everyone for joining, and it was awesome sharing some stories.
I'm just going to end that first poll. Let's see if I can figure out how to launch the next one. Poll 2. So how many clients do you roughly work with in your firm? Just so we know who's on here today. So the few different buckets there. Whatever one you think, it doesn't matter what that exact number is, but generally where would you fall into? You could answer that. We will be sending over an email afterwards with both the recording and the slides. So if you did want to review that, share it with anyone else, or have a look back at some of the stuff we talked about, happy to do that.
There's one more question. Darlene was wondering if we had any practice accounting, but I'm assuming that might just be practice accounts or demo accounts. And are there any referral programs?
Is that for both? You go first, Fady, and then I'll go after.
Yeah. So yeah, we have referral programs. There's a little benchmark of how many clients you put on, and then you're included into the referral program. We do offer a free 14-day trial if you want to go and play around with the system. We don't do a demo count because Clockwork's real kind of wow moment is seeing your data, your accounts, everything you customize to you. But feel free to take advantage of the free 14-day trial as well.
Cool. In terms of, so unfortunately we aren't offering any CPEs for today's webinar. It's just us. That's something we may look at in the future, but there's kind of like an accreditation process. But I hope you did learn something, although you might not get CPE. Brian there was wondering about the trials for both programs, might be needing some more time. Brian, we'll reach out to you directly and see if we can work something out to make sure you can have a better understanding of how the trials work. And then referral program for practice ignition, we do pay out. I don't know if we were included in that question. We do have a referral program, so if you did want to refer a friend or a client, I will put a link in the chat where you can sign up for that. We have one last question, and this one is pretty important. We just want to make sure we can follow up from this correctly. So just basically wanting to know if you're interested in learning more about any of the software that was presented today. So perhaps you're new to practice ignition, want to learn more, new to Clockwork, want to learn more, or maybe you're new to both and do need some more. And if you are an existing customer of practice ignition too, feel free to say you're interested, and you can have a catch up with one of our team just to make sure you are getting the most of the account that you might already have set up. If anyone else has questions, pop them in the chat or the Q&A. And it looks like about half of us answered that last question. If you could get that one answered in the last couple of minutes, it'd be super helpful for us. So if you're still on, just go ahead and answer that last one. All right, I'm gonna end the poll in 10 seconds. So if you haven't got to it and you're still on, just go ahead and click there. Well, I just want to say on behalf of Practice Ignition, thanks for joining us. We always try to do sessions like this that will help you when you're thinking about your firm and how you're growing, and hopefully bring on speakers like Fady who can bring some really unique insights. So we'll definitely be partnering more moving forward. So you'll probably see more of Clockwork. But thanks for joining today, and we hope you find the content valuable. Fady, do you have any last words?
Nope. Thank you guys all. Thank you, Ryan and Lizzie, and definitely looking forward to some follow up. I'm sure I'll be sending some emails out with the discount code for attending the webinar, and look forward to speaking to all of you and moving things forward.
Awesome. Well, we're coming to the top of the hour, so we said we'd go an hour, so just want to make sure we end on time. But thanks for joining us, everyone, and have a nice day.
Thanks.